Welcome to Washington Hospital Today, dedicated to informing residents about healthcare topics and issues. Through programs featuring community forums and free health and wellness classes, our goal is to empower community members with the information needed to make informed health decisions. Washington Hospital has been providing health care to the residents of the Washington Township Healthcare District for the past 60 years. Today's presenter is Alana Nohrden. Alana is a clinical nutritionist.
All right, hi everyone. Thank you, Vida, for the introduction. Like she said, my name is Alana Nohrden. I am a registered dietitian and I work here at Washington Hospital. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about dining out. And so really the topic of our presentation is, how can we as diabetics go out to eat and still stick with our goals and stick with our meal plan that we've worked with our dietitian on? Not just, general tips, but also some tips specific to the cuisine that we really see here in Fremont. So according to the CDC, Americans eat out at least 3 times per week on average. That's quite a bit. And so what we order at the restaurant, the way that they prepare the food, the portion sizes that they provide can impact our ability to stick with our diet plan. So the portion sizes that we choose or that are provided by the restaurant and the way that they prepare the food can impact our ability to stick with our meal plan that we've worked with our dietitian on. So how can you eat out while still managing your diabetes and sticking with your meal plan? That's what we're here to answer today. So we'll back it up first. So why is diabetes management so important? Well, really, diabetes, especially uncontrolled diabetes, having that chronically high blood sugar can impact several different organs in our body. Our heart, especially, diabetics are at twice the risk or twice as likely to develop cardiac disease and stroke, and at a younger age. Kidney health as well. Diabetes is the leading cause of chronic kidney disease and also the leading cause of amputations, lower body amputations, and of adult onset blindness. So when we're talking about diabetes, we're not just talking about how can we monitor the carbs that we're eating and make sure that we're not exceeding our carbohydrate goals and needs, but also how can we protect our heart and protect our other organs. So we're not just talking about carbohydrate, but also fat and sodium as well. How can we, control our intake of those other nutrients when we're dining out. So just as a reminder, you're probably familiar with these numbers, but these are the blood sugar goals according to the American Diabetes Association. So fasting glucose or blood sugar before the meal between 70 and 130, and then after the meal no more than 180. And then the A1C, the hemoglobin A1C, which is an average of our blood sugar control over the past 3 months, we want to keep that under 7%. So when we're going out to eat, bringing your medications and bringing your meter is also really important, and that's something that's easy to forget when we're going out to eat, but it's important to continue to monitor our blood sugar just like we would at home. So of course, maintaining appropriate blood sugar isn't just diet. There's other factors that come into play, and we really rely on all these different modalities to make sure that we are controlling our blood sugar. It's not just diet, it's not just medication, it's also monitoring our blood sugar, getting that exercise, working with our doctor, working with our dietitian, working with our nurse, and really taking that team approach to have successful diabetes management. So this is the My Plate for diabetics. How many of you have seen this before? Okay, a few of you, yeah. So this is just kind of a reminder of what our plate should look like. And this is really a nice guide, whether we're eating in the house or at a restaurant. So you can see here that we have the vegetable group is our biggest group here. And then we have our grains, or our whole grains, our starchy vegetables up in the corner there. And then our lean proteins down here. Oops, sorry. And then up in the corner there we have fruit, and we have dairy up in the other corner there. Can anyone tell me how this is different than my plate that's not specific to diabetics? The smaller portion is definitely true for the fruit group. For your average, general guideline for average Americans, the My Plate looks very similar to this. The only difference is that the fruit and the veggies are combined in that half of a plate. The reason why it's separated, of course, is because fruit does contain carbohydrate. Doesn't mean that it's any less, healthy for us. It's still full of fiber and micronutrients that we need to function properly and feel our best. But it's in a smaller, separate category because we also have to watch for the carbohydrate, of course, because that can impact our blood sugar. And then we have our whole grains and our starchy veggies up in the corner. And so portion control is something that we all think of when we talk about how can we eat healthier when we go out to eat. So really limiting our portions is really the simplest way to cut back on the carbohydrate, the fat, and the sodium that we would find in many dishes when we go out to eat. So that's kind of an ideal way that we can still eat the foods that we really love, just in moderation, so that we can have, whatever we're craving, but a small amount of it. So how do we decrease our portions without also feeling hungry and not feeling satisfied after the meal? The idea is to add veggies and add things that are not as dense with calories. My mom always used to say, a lot of fluff and a little bit of goo. And the fluff is veggies and greens and things like that are fluffy and not very filling, but they don't seem that filling, but they actually tend to be high in fiber, and so they actually do fill us up, but they don't seem as heavy and as rich when we're eating the meal. And then the goo is the stuff like the meats and the cheeses and things like that feel a little bit heavier when we're eating. So if we can cut back on some of those foods that are high in carbohydrate, high in fat, high in sodium, and add a little fluff in there by adding more vegetables, that's a good way to get the foods that we love, but also feel satisfied at the end of the meal because we have all that good fiber and just the volume from having those veggies in the meal as well. So oftentimes when we go out to eat, we get a basket of bread or a basket of chips, something like that, as we're waiting for our entree. And so that's something that it's really hard to resist once it comes to the table, right? Especially when you're hungry, you first sit down to eat. But that's a easy way to overeat and to exceed your carb goals for the meal. And really, that's usually not why we come to the restaurant. Some people, that's certainly why, is to have that bread basket. But for most of us, we're probably more excited about our entree, but we're really hungry and the bread's right there. So it's easy to overdo on the bread or to fill up and kind of spoil our appetite. So maybe we don't enjoy the entree as much that we were really looking forward to. So just talking with your server right when you sit down and saying, hey, can we, if you offer any bread or chips, please hold back. Or, we'd like a small portion and please don't send any refills. You see there's a roti right here, and that looks pretty tempting. If you're hungry and you just sat down, you probably want to dig in on that. I know I would. Another way to cut back on the portions is asking your server to bring a to-go box. Yeah, right when you first get your meal. Perfect, yeah, and it's much easier to divide it and put it away when you still have the other half to eat, right? It's much harder to stop yourself and then put it away. So that's another way to kind of watch the portions, and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, because when we're eating, oftentimes we get to that point where we know we're full, but it just looks so good and there's still more on the plate, and so we're tempted to continue eating, when in reality we're satisfied, and by eating more we may not feel very good. And then also sharing with a friend, sharing an entree with a friend, an appetizer, sharing among the group is always a good way to cut back on the portion as well. All right, so for proteins and desserts, there's some specific recommendations or suggestions. So like we talked about meats, we want to choose lean meats like a turkey breast, chicken breast, fish, and other lean proteins like eggs, tofu, things like that. If it is a meat, a skinless meat, of course, because a lot of fat lives in the skin. And then a lot of the calories and the fat that we get from eating meat has to do with the way that it's prepared. So when we see words like grill, boil, roast, steam, to us that kind of triggers that it's being cooked without that much added fat. When we see words like fried or crispy, that's a hint that, okay, they're adding some fat to give that meat more flavor. So that those calories can really add up as well, especially if it's deep fried and breaded. There's some carbohydrate in there as well. So dessert, skipping dessert altogether, which is easier said than done, or sharing with a friend like you can see here, or choosing something a little lighter like fresh fruit, gelatin, a sherbet, something like that where it's a little lower in sugar, but you're still kind of satisfying that sweet tooth. Especially berries and things like that tend to be really good options for dessert. And so beverages are another way that we can really use up a lot of our carbohydrate and calorie budget without getting that much satisfaction out of it. That's why we tend to consider caloric drinks sort of empty calories, because we're not really getting that much nutrition from them. And they're not really helping us to feel full or to feel satiated. And so we would be better spending those calories and those carbohydrates on food that would help us to feel full. And so choosing water or lower calorie options like an unsweetened iced tea or unsweetened hot tea or coffee or sparkling water or even diet soda. And then filling up with water and using water as a way to sort of quench our appetite a bit. Drinking a nice glass of water before a meal and throughout the meal helps to kind of help us feel satisfied as well, that we tend to eat a little bit less, one, when we're adequately hydrated, but two, that it does take up some volume as well. Alcohol, of course, as you know, can be really dangerous for diabetics. So we only would suggest drinking alcohol if your doctor is approved. If you've talked with your doctor about that and they've said, this is safe for you, and of course always in moderation. And then with that, choosing alcohol that is a little lower in carbohydrate. So like a light beer, a dry wine like a Chardonnay or a Pinot Grigio is a little drier, less sweet tasting. And then also if a mixed drink with sugar-free mixers like a sparkling water and lime, something like that. One idea is to do like a sparkling water with lime like you see here and then ask for it tall. It's the same amount of alcohol but more water. But something to keep in mind, of course, with alcohol, other than just that it is empty calories, is also that when we do drink alcohol, it makes it a little tougher for us to stick to our meal plan. We're a little less likely to make the same healthy choices that we would make if we weren't drinking. And we tend to eat a little bit more and eat foods that don't fit quite as well into our meal plan. So just something to consider there. So just a few other tips. Buffet, you can see this sign. All day, every day, all you can eat buffet. That alone is a little bit risky, right? Buffets can be tough to control ourselves, especially because there's such a variety of food, so many different things to try. It's so hard not to overeat. But of course, there are occasions where you just can't avoid the buffet. So if that is the case, using that My Plate diagram is really helpful. And you may not even have it physically with you, but just keeping in mind, okay, I'm gonna take my plate and fill it up once, and I remember what that plate should look like, that it should be about half veggies, then whole grains, lean proteins, little bit of fruit, and a little bit of low-fat dairy. And then in the cooking method, you can also talk with your server about, if you're ordering something, how is that prepared? Is it possible to use less butter or less oil in the preparation, or cut back on the sauce, use a lighter less sauce on whatever it is. Also, sides are an underrated part of the menu when you're going out to eat, because some entrees come with sides that tend to be a little bit heavier in calories and carbohydrate, like French fries, things like that. There are other side options. You can ask to switch it out. Switch, instead of the fries, do a side salad or maybe a baked sweet potato or something like that. It's giving you a little bit more nutrition. Also, sides can be a really great way to kind of build your own meal, that we don't have to just choose from the list of entrees. We can choose from the appetizers, or we can choose from the sides and sort of create our own my plate that's going to be a little bit, if we choose things that are lower in calories and carbohydrate and fat, that will help us to stick with our goals. And they're just sort of inherently more sensible portions being a side or being an appetizer. Again, watching for the wording, the crispy or breaded, those are kind of hints that something might be deep fried, and asking how, can that be prepared another way? Most often, if you have like a fried chicken, you can ask for it to be grilled, and most restaurants offer that. And then also, does the restaurant have nutrition information? More and more restaurants are sort of getting on that bandwagon that, our customers want to know what's in their food, and they want to know so that they can make the best choice. And so, asking for that nutrition information, or even looking online and seeing, do they have that information available? If it's something where, you're going out, maybe it's a business meeting or something where you don't quite want to ask for the nutrition information and go through the brochure, you can look online ahead of time and decide what you'd like to eat and see what the healthier choices are. And then also, getting any physical activity that you can is always a good idea, whether it's, walking to the restaurant from your house and walking back, or just parking further away from the restaurant and getting a few more steps that way. Another good idea is just taking a walk with whoever you went to dinner with after dinner, or whatever meal it is. It's a nice way to spend more time with the people that you're trying to spend time with, right? It kind of extends the event, makes it a little bit more fun. And then also, of course, by getting those steps, you're helping to prevent those spikes in your blood sugar after the meal. And it also helps with digestion. I know I can attest to this. Going out to eat, sometimes you come home and you just want to, unbutton the top button of your pants and lay on the couch because you're so full. That kind of helps with that digestion as well. Yeah, so multiple benefits. So this is called Dining Around the World. So we want to look at not just general guidelines, but are there specific recommendations for the types of cuisine that we see most often in Fremont? So the city of Fremont, this is based on the 2010 census, so we're almost due for another one, so this may be a little bit outdated. But in 2010, Fremont, the city, was about 18% Indian, about 18% Chinese, 11% Mexican, and 7% Filipino. So we shouldn't be any surprise that we have a ton of really good Asian food options and Latin food options in Fremont. We're really lucky that we have so many different types of cuisine that we can choose from. So that's really what we focused on. So when we're dining out at an Asian restaurant, what are some specific things that we can look for to make the meal a little healthier? One is just prioritizing the carbohydrates. There's so many good carbohydrates in Asian cuisine. We have noodles, we have rice, we have naan and roti, and we have lentils, and so many different things that provide carbohydrates that are so tasty that if we get a little of everything, it can really add up. So prioritizing, which of those, which is my favorite, which is the carb that I want the most, and then the rest of my meal try and make it, lower carb choices. So for rice, getting steamed rice instead of fried rice can cut back on the fat and calories. And then also, of course, brown rice as a whole grain rather than white rice. Noodles, cutting back on the portion, and this is true for anything, of course. And then also choosing whole wheat noodles, like a soba noodle or something like that. And that will also, it helps control our blood sugar, but it also has that fiber that will help us feel a little bit full, a little bit longer as well. And then when we're looking at soups can be a good option that can be lower in calories and lower in fat, but we do have to watch the sodium. So getting a smaller portion, again, of the soup, like a cup of soup, is a good way to control for that sodium. Also choosing soups that are broth-based rather than a cream-based soup. That's a good way to cut back on the fat and calories. And then also reduce sodium soup if they do offer that. And then for sauces are so tasty, but there's a reason why they're so tasty. They can really add up the calories. They can be really high in fat and sodium and also sugar, depending on what the sauce is. So getting the sauce on the side, or asking for it to be lightly sauced, or doing the dip and stab technique. Does anyone know what that refers to? Exactly, yeah. So actually just dipping your fork in the sauce first and then stabbing whatever it is that you're going to eat. That way you get a controlled amount of sauce, and it's just enough to give you that flavor, but without, drenching the whole thing in sauce. And then many restaurants also offer a low sodium soy sauce, and that can really cut back on the salt as well if you're using soy sauce, or if the dish is prepared with soy sauce. So some specifics, if you're at an Indian restaurant, what are some healthier options? So dal is always a good option. Dal is just lentils prepared different ways. Lentils, of course, are very high in fiber. They have some protein and lots of vitamins and minerals, and so they do help to kind of prevent those spikes in blood sugar as well. Tandoori meat or fish is a method of cooking that is sort of, in terms of nutrition, is similar to grilling in that the flavor is really coming from the marinade and the cooking method rather than adding fats and getting flavor from the fats. So it's a little bit more of a dry cooking. Chana masala is a good option as well, and that is chickpeas and tomatoes and different herbs and spices. Of course, chickpeas are also similar to lentils in that they're high in fiber, protein, vitamins, minerals. Aloo gobi is a cauliflower potato blend with some other vegetables and herbs and spices. Again, lots of good vegetables with some potato that you're getting some carbohydrate from that, but lots of fiber as well. And then kebabs with tomato chutney. That's another good option, that it's just a plain way of cooking meat where you're not adding a lot of sauce and a lot of fat. All right, and so when we're eating at a Chinese restaurant, what are some tips as well? Hot and sour soup, wonton soup. Again, those are both broth-based, so those can be good options. Mushroom chicken, broccoli beef, things like that where it's more simple dishes. It's a steamed vegetable with a meat that's not deep fried or coated in a lot of fat and high sugar marinades. Vegetable stir fry, of course, with chicken or shrimp, another lean meat. And then sauces, some sauces can be quite high in sugar and fat. Some better options would be like a chili sauce, a hot mustard, or a plum sauce. Of course, it depends how it's prepared, but traditionally these sauces tend to be a little lower in fat and calories and sodium as well. And then for Latin food, of course, we see a lot of rice and beans. Rice replacing, of course, cutting down the portion, but also replacing it with a black bean or with a salad is a good option. Beans, a whole black bean is probably your best bet for what you can find at typical Latin restaurants. Refried beans aren't always made with lard, but that is sort of the traditional method. So many restaurants still use lard to make their refried beans. And again, that's something you can ask your server about. Tortillas, that's something that you could either do without or choose a corn tortilla. Those tend to be quite a bit smaller than flour tortillas, so less calories and carbohydrate there. And then tacos, a soft taco is going to have less fat and calories as well because it's not deep fried. That's how we get that crispy taco shell, is from deep frying those soft tacos. So a soft taco would be a better alternative. And then chips, again, like the bread at the beginning of the meal, it's a good way to fill up and spend a lot of our carbohydrate budget, right? So skipping the chips or just asking for a small portion and asking that they don't refill the basket. And then again, adding that fluff, adding extra veggies, whether it's lettuce, tomatoes, onion, any of those veggies that we see incorporated into other dishes, we can always ask, can you add a little bit more of that? Or can you replace the meat with beans, with black beans, or cut back on the meat as well? So just some examples of some healthier options at a Mexican food restaurant. Again, the soft tacos with a lean protein. And then tacos, you can actually use a lettuce wrap as well. That's becoming more and more popular. Similar to like a protein style burger, it's just a lettuce wrap instead of the tortilla. Fajitas are a good option because it's pretty basic. It's just vegetables and whatever meat. There is some oil, but there's a lot of veggies and a lot of fluff in there too. Burrito bowls, if you love burritos, a burrito bowl might be a better option because you're skipping that tortilla. And then a taco salad without the fried shell. And then any broth-based soup, like a tortilla soup, is generally a good option. And ceviche, which is the raw seafood marinated with tomatoes and onions and usually cilantro, that's a good option as well for something that's high in protein and low in carbohydrate. So this is something that you might find at your typical kind of commercialized Chinese restaurant. Can anyone tell me how we can make this healthier? Portions, yes, thank you. Skip the fried, exactly, yeah. See if we can find a grilled chicken or shrimp or something like that that's not fried, exactly. All right, yeah, so great suggestions. You know, cutting back on the portion size for sure. Also, you know, it looks like there's a lot of sauce on the meats here. Maybe we could get that on the side or lightly sauced. And maybe asking for if they have like a brown rice instead of white rice, steamed rice instead of fried. Those are some other options as well. All right, so this is sort of a typical Indian meal that you would find at a restaurant. And this is a chicken tikka masala with rice and naan bread. Can anyone tell me how? This one's not quite as obvious, right? Can anyone tell me how we can make this a little healthier? So the portions here are still pretty big. Yeah, 2 bowls of rice, a lot of naan. We're really gonna add up our carbs pretty quick there. Tandoori chicken would be lower in calories, especially with the tikka masala. It's generally made with heavy cream and tomato sauce, and so it can be quite high in fat and calories as well. The only other thing I can think of is the naan bread. Switching that with like a roti is generally made with a whole wheat flour versus naan is made with a white flour usually. So that's another option. And this is a pork adobo over fried rice. I would say portions, exactly. Yeah, that'd be the main thing I'd see here. And then tacos from a Mexican restaurant. Yeah, soft taco instead of the crispy, definitely. Yeah, and then it looks like there's quite a bit of meat there. Maybe we could replace some of that meat with some beans and add some vegetables and kind of bulk it up with foods that are not quite so dense. Maybe substitute that, instead of that cheese, maybe some fresh avocado, something like that. All right, so just to kind of recap what we talked about, sort of the highlights here in terms of when you're going to a restaurant, what to look for. Number one, again, portion control. It's the simplest way to cut back and still enjoy the foods that you love. Choosing foods with less carbohydrate, less meat, and less sodium or salt, and less fat. Limiting those empty calories that we get from beverages. Remembering the My Plate portions and what a plate should look like on your meal plan. Asking for that nutrition information, and then incorporating some physical activity, you know, before and after the meal. But I do want to leave you with this, because no matter what, we're going to a restaurant to enjoy the food, right? So we have to remind ourselves that we need to savor our food, to eat slowly, and to really enjoy what we're eating and honor our hunger cues and our fullness cues. If our body is telling us we're hungry, to honor that, and if our body is telling us to stop, to honor that as well. Because really that's the reason why we go out to eat, right? Is for that enjoyment. And so we can't forget that piece of it as well. And again, just to bring it all back together, we touched on the diet part, of course, which is huge in managing your diabetes. And I may be biased because I'm a dietitian, but I do believe that it is very, very pivotal. That being said, taking your medications and monitoring your blood sugar and getting that physical activity is just as important. That it really takes all of these different components to be successful in managing our diabetes. All right, that is all for me.